Have you ever noticed how the strongest women often smile while silently carrying invisible battles? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Today, I invite you to look closer, not just at the strength women show, but at the untold pain they hide. This is more than a reflection, it is a call to see, to feel, and to understand. When we look at strong women in our families, our workplaces, or even among our closest friends, we often see only the strength they present to the world. We see their ability to handle crises, to lead with confidence, to endure suffering without complaint. But what remains hidden are the silent battles they fight within themselves. Carl Jung observed that what is repressed in the unconscious does not vanish. It manifests in other ways, often as suffering that is misunderstood both by the world and by the person herself. For strong women, this repression often takes the form of denying their vulnerability, their exhaustion, and even their deep human need for care. The tension between who they must appear to be and who they truly are becomes the ground of their inner conflict. Consider the cultural expectations imposed on women across generations. A strong woman is praised when she sacrifices for others, when she becomes the caretaker, when she takes on both professional and personal burdens with grace. She is admired when she seems unbreakable, when she shows no signs of weakness. Yet, behind the applause is a prison, the prison of never being allowed to rest, to fall apart, to admit she too needs support. Jung described this conflict as the clash between persona and shadow. The persona is the mask we wear for society, while the shadow holds the parts of us that are denied. For many strong women, the persona is the tireless leader, the healer, the mother, the warrior. But in the shadow lives her fatigue, her anger, her sadness, and her longing to simply be human. What makes this struggle so hidden is that it does not align with how society wishes to see women. People are comfortable celebrating resilience, but uncomfortable acknowledging the wounds that resilience conceals. A woman who is endlessly strong becomes a symbol, and symbols are rarely granted the right to cry. Jung warned us that when one part of the psyche is overemphasized, the opposite will demand attention. If strength is overemphasized, fragility will surface, often through anxiety, depression, or feelings of emptiness. These are not signs of failure, but signs that the unconscious is calling for balance. Imagine, then, the weight a strong woman carries. She is praised for her achievements, yet silently punished if she shows her pain. She is admired for her endurance, yet unseen when that endurance has eroded her spirit. She becomes a paradox, honored for her ability to withstand storms, but left alone in the aftermath. Jung believed that wholeness comes not from denying these contradictions, but from integrating them. To recognize both strength and vulnerability is the beginning of individuation, the process by which a person becomes whole and authentic. Let us humanize this further. Picture the woman who never says no, who is always available, always dependable. Her friends describe her as the rock. Her colleagues see her as the leader who never falters. On the surface, she fulfills the archetype of the heroine, the one who saves others. But in the quiet of her own mind, she may feel invisible, unseen for who she truly is. Her tears fall in solitude, because she has learned that to reveal them is to risk being perceived as weak. Jung would say that her true self is buried beneath layers of persona, waiting for recognition. Her strength is real, but it is incomplete without the acknowledgement of her pain. This hidden battle is not merely personal, it is cultural and generational. Women have been taught for centuries to carry burdens silently, to embody resilience as though it were their only identity. When Carl Jung studied myths and archetypes across cultures, he noticed recurring figures: the nurturing mother, the self-sacrificing heroine, the wise old woman. These archetypes, while powerful, also become chains when they are the only roles allowed. A woman becomes trapped within them, forgetting that she is more than an archetype. She is a living, breathing human being with needs, desires, and vulnerabilities. The educational lesson here is that these hidden battles are not weaknesses but signals. They are the psyche's way of demanding integration. When a woman feels the weight of her unacknowledged exhaustion, it is her unconscious sending a message: do not neglect me. Do not forget that strength without balance becomes destruction. Jung encouraged us to listen to dreams, to emotions, to moments of weariness. because they reveal the parts of ourselves we have silenced. For strong women, listening to these signals is not indulgence. It is survival. We must also recognize how this affects relationships. When a woman hides her struggles, those around her often assume she does not need support. She is left alone precisely because she appears so capable. This loneliness deepens the wound. Jung would remind us that isolation of the soul leads to despair. For the human being is not designed to live fragmented. A woman who appears endlessly strong, but feels unseen lives a split existence, admired by others, abandoned by herself. The cost is profound. And yet the path forward is not in abandoning strength, but in redefining it. Strength is not the absence of weakness. True strength is the courage to face one's shadow, to admit the pain carried within, and to invite others into that sacred space. Jung's psychology teaches us that integration is the essence of healing. For the strong woman, integration means holding her strength in one hand and her vulnerability in the other, refusing to let either be exiled. In that integration, her silent battles transform into conscious choices, her hidden pain into wisdom, and her resilience into authenticity. The hidden battles of strong women are not a sign of failure but of humanity. They are the inevitable outcome of living in a world that demands one-sided strength. Jung called us to look within, to bring light to what is hidden. When we begin to see the invisible weight strong women carry, we do not diminish their power, we honor their wholeness. Carl Jung taught us that every strength casts a shadow. Whenever a part of the psyche is exaggerated or overemphasized, the neglected opposite retreats into the unconscious, waiting to be acknowledged. For strong women, their strength often becomes their defining identity, yet beneath that identity lies a shadow, loneliness, exhaustion, and suppressed pain. These are not flaws but the unseen costs of being the one others rely on. To understand this shadow is to see the full truth of their experience, not merely the persona society applauds. When we speak of loneliness, we must remember that it is not always about the absence of people. Many strong women are surrounded by family, friends, colleagues, and admirers. They may appear connected, busy, even fulfilled. Yet their loneliness comes from something deeper, the feeling of not being seen for who they truly are. They are seen for their strength, their achievements, their reliability, but not for their vulnerability. Jung would describe this as the conflict between persona and self. The persona of the strong woman is applauded, but the deeper self, the part that longs to rest, to be understood, to be held, remains unseen. This kind of loneliness is profound, because it exists even in the midst of company. It is the loneliness of being known only for half of who you are. Exhaustion is another part of this shadow. The strong woman carries responsibilities that often exceed what is humanly sustainable. She becomes the one who solves problems, who supports others, who keeps everything together. Outwardly, she appears tireless. Inwardly, she may feel drained to the point of despair. Jung observed that the psyche is like an organism, it seeks balance. When one pole, such as constant strength, is overdeveloped, the neglected pole, rest, weakness, or surrender, will eventually demand recognition. If ignored, it may surface through physical illness, emotional breakdown, or sudden withdrawal from life. The exhaustion of strong women is therefore not merely physical but psychic. It is the cost of denying themselves the right to pause, the right to let others carry them for a change. Suppressed pain forms the third part of this shadow. Pain that is unspoken does not disappear, it sinks into the unconscious. Jung warned that what we do not bring to consciousness will return as fate. For women who suppress their pain, it may resurface as patterns, choosing relationships where they are always the caretaker, finding themselves in roles where they are never allowed to show need, or experiencing repeated emotional emptiness. Suppression is an attempt to protect the image of strength, but it comes at the cost of authenticity. The more pain is hidden, the more it shapes life from the shadows. To humanize this, think of the woman who is always described as resilient, who never seems to falter. Her friends admire her independence, her colleagues rely on her consistency, her family depends on her sacrifices. Yet, when she is alone at night, she feels the quiet ache of solitude. She lies awake, too weary to rest, replaying the day's burdens in her mind. Her exhaustion is not visible, because she has mastered the art of smiling. Her pain is not spoken, because she fears that revealing it would disappoint those who count on her. She embodies the Jungian principle of repression. What cannot be expressed consciously remains alive in the unconscious, shaping her destiny silently. Jung's concept of individuation helps us understand why this shadow must be faced. Individuation is the process of integrating all parts of the self, both light and dark, both strength and vulnerability. For strong women, individuation requires more than celebrating their power. It requires acknowledging their loneliness, honoring their exhaustion, and giving voice to their suppressed pain. Only then can they become whole, no longer trapped in a one-sided identity. Without this integration, their shadow continues to govern them from beneath awareness, creating cycles of silent suffering. It is also important to recognize how culture amplifies this shadow. Women are often rewarded for their endurance, but discouraged from showing their breaking points. From childhood, many are taught to be helpers, caretakers, achievers. The archetypes Jung studied, mother, heroine, wise woman, become internalized scripts. They provide meaning, but they can also become prisons if lived exclusively. The strong woman archetype without balance leaves no room for fragility. And so women suppress their tears, dismiss their needs, and push forward even when their bodies and souls plead for rest. The shadow of this cultural script is the growing silence inside them, the unspoken cry that says, "I am tired. I am human. I cannot be everything for everyone." From an educational standpoint, we must learn to see these shadows not as failures but as signals. Loneliness tells us that connection is needed. Not just social connection, but soul connection, where one is seen fully. Exhaustion tells us that rest and reciprocity are essential to health. Suppressed pain tells us that healing requires expression, not silence. When we fail to heed these signals, the psyche will find other ways to demand attention, through anxiety, illness, or emotional collapse. Jung believed that suffering, when brought into consciousness, could become a source of growth. For strong women, bringing their shadow into awareness transforms pain into wisdom and loneliness into deeper connection. This understanding calls us to shift how we view strength. Strength is not the absence of weakness. True strength, in Jungian terms, is the courage to face the shadow, to look directly at loneliness, exhaustion, and pain without denial. It is the willingness to integrate these experiences into the story of the self, rather than hiding them away. In this integration, strength becomes authentic rather than performative, whole rather than fractured. When we acknowledge the shadow of strength, we do not diminish the strong woman, we liberate her. We allow her to be more than her role, more than her archetype. We allow her to be human. Carl Jung reminded us that the goal of life is not perfection but wholeness. For strong women, wholeness is found not in denying their shadow but in embracing it. Their loneliness, exhaustion, and suppressed pain are not weaknesses to hide. They are truths to honor, gateways to a deeper, more authentic kind of strength. Carl Jung believed that the greatest task of a human life is individuation, the process by which a person integrates all the parts of themselves into a harmonious whole. Individuation is not the pursuit of perfection, but the reconciliation of opposites, light and shadow, conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, strength and vulnerability. For strong women, whose identities are often defined by resilience and competence, individuation requires a profound reorientation. It demands that they not only honor their power, but also embrace their fragility, for without both, they remain incomplete. Strength, as the world defines it, often becomes one-sided. Strong women are praised for enduring, for carrying others, for standing firm when life's storms rage. They are celebrated for what they can give, what they can handle, what they can survive. Yet this very celebration creates an invisible danger. When strength becomes the only acceptable face, vulnerability is cast into the shadows. Jung warned us that the rejected parts of the psyche do not disappear, they remain alive in the unconscious, waiting to be acknowledged. For the strong woman, unacknowledged vulnerability becomes suppressed pain, hidden weariness, or quiet despair. Individuation requires bringing this vulnerability into consciousness, not as weakness but as an essential counterpart to strength. To understand this more deeply, consider the archetype of the heroine. In myth, she is the one who overcomes, who fights, who saves. Many strong women live within this archetype, carrying families, careers, and communities. But every heroine also has a hidden counterpart, the wounded figure who longs for rest, compassion, and healing. When the heroine refuses to acknowledge her wounds, she becomes hardened, disconnected from her own humanity. Jung would say that individuation occurs when she no longer denies this inner woundedness, but integrates it into her identity. She remains strong, but her strength becomes tempered by tenderness. She becomes more than a symbol, she becomes whole. In practical terms, uniting strength with vulnerability means allowing oneself to admit, "I cannot do this alone." It means recognizing the limits of endurance, acknowledging the need for rest, and accepting help without shame. Culturally, this is radical. Women have been conditioned to prove themselves endlessly, to validate their worth by their capacity to endure. But individuation challenges this conditioning. Jung's psychology calls for honesty with oneself above all else. For strong women, honesty requires admitting that behind their competence is a heart that sometimes feels fragile. Behind their resilience is a body that sometimes feels tired, and behind their independence is a soul that sometimes longs to be held. This integration of opposites also reshapes relationships. When a strong woman refuses to reveal her vulnerability, she may unconsciously create distance. Others admire her, rely on her, but rarely feel invited into her deeper world. Her strength becomes a barrier rather than a bridge. But when she allows others to witness her vulnerability, intimacy deepens. Her relationships become reciprocal, no longer defined by her constant giving but by mutual presence. Jung's insight was that what is denied inwardly often creates distortions outwardly. By denying vulnerability, the strong woman may find herself in friendships or partnerships that take her for granted. But when she integrates vulnerability, she reshapes the pattern, inviting connections that are authentic rather than one-sided. To humanize this further, picture a woman who is known as the pillar of her community. She organizes, she leads, she encourages, she provides. Everyone sees her as unshakable. Yet in private she sometimes feels the ache of invisibility. She asks herself, if I stopped being strong, would anyone still value me? This question is not a failure, it is the soul's cry for wholeness. Jung would tell us that such a question signals the beginning of individuation. It is the unconscious urging the woman to embrace all parts of herself, not only the persona of strength, but also the hidden longing to be cared for. When she listens to that voice and allows herself to reveal her vulnerability, she discovers a new kind of strength, the strength that comes from authenticity. The educational lesson here is that individuation is not abstract. It is lived daily, in choices both small and large. When a strong woman says no to yet another demand, she honors her limits. When she admits to a trusted friend, "I am tired," she honors her truth. When she allows herself to cry rather than holding back tears, she integrates her emotions rather than repressing them. These acts may seem simple, but in Jungian terms, they are profound. They are steps toward wholeness. Each act of honesty brings the unconscious into consciousness, weaving strength and vulnerability into a single fabric. It is also essential to see how individuation transforms the meaning of strength itself. Strength ceases to be the mask of invulnerability. Instead, it becomes the courage to be real, the courage to face one's shadow, the courage to embrace imperfection. Jung emphasized that the goal is not to eliminate contradiction but to hold it. For strong women, this means no longer choosing between being powerful or being fragile. It means learning that one can be both powerful in action and fragile in feeling, resilient in the world and tender in the soul. In embracing this paradox, strong women embody a deeper kind of wisdom. They show us that true leadership is not built on the denial of pain, but on the integration of it. They teach that wholeness is not about appearing flawless, but about being fully human. Carl Jung often reminded us that the self is vast, containing all opposites. Individuation allows a woman to live not as a fragmented symbol, but as a complete being, both strong and vulnerable, both giver and receiver, both resilient and tender. This is not weakness, it is the essence of authenticity. Carl Jung often reminded us that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This truth lies at the heart of healing for strong women. For too long, their silent suffering has remained hidden, shaping their choices, their relationships, and even their sense of identity. Healing does not begin by adding more strength to what is already strong. It begins when the suffering carried in silence is brought into the light of awareness. It is in this act of acknowledgement that resilience transforms from mere endurance into authenticity. Strong women are admired for carrying burdens with grace. But admiration does not heal. What heals is truth. The hidden suffering they carry often comes from years of silence, unspoken exhaustion, unacknowledged grief, unexpressed anger. Jung believed that what is denied inwardly does not simply disappear. It becomes part of the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is the repository of everything we have pushed away, everything we were told not to feel or express. For strong women, their shadow often holds the pain of being overlooked, the frustration of always being relied upon, and the deep weariness of never being allowed to rest. Healing requires that this shadow be faced, not with judgment but with compassion. To humanize this, imagine the woman who is always called reliable. Her colleagues admire her because she never misses a deadline. Her family respects her because she is always available. Her friends look up to her because she listens more than she speaks. Outwardly, she appears fulfilled. But inside, she may feel unseen and misunderstood. When she allows herself to acknowledge, "I am tired of always being the strong one," she takes the first step toward healing. Jung would call this making the unconscious conscious. The feeling of weariness, once hidden, becomes a truth that can be worked with. By naming her pain, she loosens its grip. Education in psychology teaches us that repression consumes energy. The more a person suppresses, the more psychic energy is bound up in keeping truths hidden. For strong women, this constant suppression often leads to burnout or a sense of emptiness. Healing begins when energy is no longer wasted on repression, but redirected toward expression. This does not mean collapsing into weakness. It means telling the truth about what one feels, even if only to oneself at first. Jung's work shows that the psyche thrives when all parts of it are allowed to have a voice. By giving voice to her suffering, the strong woman reclaims her vitality. This process of bringing suffering into awareness also reshapes identity. Many strong women unconsciously define themselves only by what they can endure. Their story becomes one of resilience, but not necessarily of joy. When suffering is acknowledged, resilience takes on a new meaning. It no longer means merely surviving. It means living authentically. The woman who once believed her worth came from never breaking now begins to see that her true worth comes from her wholeness. Jung described individuation as becoming the self, and the self is never one-sided. It is strength and vulnerability together, resilience and sensitivity together. Awareness transforms her from a role into a person. Another aspect of this healing is relational. When a strong woman hides her suffering, those around her cannot offer true connection. They admire her, but they do not know her. By revealing her pain, she invites intimacy. Jung argued that authenticity fosters genuine relationships, because only when the shadow is integrated can two people meet soul to soul. For the strong woman, this might mean admitting to a friend, "I am struggling," or allowing a partner to see her tears. These moments are not signs of collapse but signs of healing. They break the illusion of invulnerability and replace it with trust. In this way, awareness of suffering becomes a bridge rather than a barrier. It is also essential to recognize that awareness does not erase pain immediately. Healing is not the same as forgetting. Jung taught that suffering, when consciously engaged, can become a source of meaning. The strong woman who admits her suffering begins to learn from it. Her exhaustion teaches her the necessity of boundaries. Her loneliness teaches her the value of genuine connection. Her suppressed grief teaches her the importance of expression. In this way, suffering transforms into wisdom. Without awareness, pain remains a wound. With awareness, pain becomes a teacher. Culturally, this process challenges stereotypes. Society often equates strength with silence, but Jungian psychology reveals the opposite: silence is repression, while speech is liberation. Healing does not require that a strong woman abandon her strength. It requires that she integrate her suffering into her story. When she says, "Yes, I am strong, but I have also been wary," she does not lose power. Instead, she gains authenticity. Others who hear her story find themselves reflected in it. Her openness becomes a gift, because it validates the hidden struggles of those who thought they were alone. From an educational perspective, the transformation of resilience into authenticity is a universal lesson. Resilience, when defined only as endurance, is limited. It becomes a kind of armor that protects but also isolates. Authenticity, however, includes resilience but transcends it. It is the willingness to be seen fully, to live in truth rather than performance. Jung's psychology insists that wholeness comes from embracing opposites. For strong women, this means embracing both the power to carry burdens and the right to lay them down. Healing is the moment when they realize they no longer need to prove their strength by hiding their suffering. In the end, the path of awareness is not easy. It requires courage to face what has been denied. But Jung would remind us that the unconscious longs for integration. The suffering that has been hidden is not there to destroy. It is there to guide. When strong women bring their suffering into awareness, they reclaim the parts of themselves they once abandoned. They become not just resilient, but real. And in becoming real, their strength shines with a new kind of brilliance. Not the brilliance of perfection, but the brilliance of authenticity. Carl Jung taught that the journey of the soul is never about perfection, but about wholeness. When we look at strong women, we see only half of the picture, if we admire their strength without recognizing their hidden battles. Their untold pain reveals to us that strength without vulnerability becomes a mask, that resilience without rest becomes exhaustion, and that silence without expression becomes suffering. The hidden battles they carry show us the cost of living only through a persona, while the shadow of strength, loneliness, weariness, and suppressed pain reminds us that what is denied will always seek expression. Individuation, as Jung described, is the great task of uniting what has been divided. For strong women, this means learning that they do not have to choose between strength and fragility, between power and tenderness, between resilience and the right to be vulnerable. Healing begins the moment their suffering is named, the moment it steps out of silence into awareness. This awareness is not a defeat, but a transformation. It reshapes strength into authenticity and turns silent endurance into conscious wisdom. A strong woman who brings her pain into the light does not lose her power, she deepens it. She becomes more than a role or an archetype. She becomes whole. And in that wholeness, she becomes free. Let us then honor strong women not only for what they endure, but for what they reveal when they allow their truth to be seen. For in their journey from silence to awareness, from shadow to integration, they teach us all the essence of Jung's insight, that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are.